Well, joining us now from our Westminster studios to discuss this further is political blogger Harry Cole. Harry, very interesting exchanges in the Commons earlier and clear fissures in the coalition, really, with the Lib Dems rather more allied to Labour, it seems, than their coalition partners.
Absolutely, it was another high action day in Westminster today, and I think David Cameron will look back today and realise that he did make a bit of a tactical mistake and hand Ed Miliband another open goal in not turning up to the Commons today to take him on. And you're right about the Lib Dems. They are beginning to side with Labour on this. They have always been anti-Murdoch, but I think there's a certain element of opportunism here on their part, because at the end of the day, Rupert Murdoch, it's been known, did not hold them in any regard, did not conceive that they'd be in power, so did absolutely nothing in the way of courting them. It's not as if they were going out of their way to avoid Murdoch. It's more, I think it's more like them saying that they weren't invited to the party rather than pretending that they didn't want to go anyway. So I think the Lib Dems need to be careful, mainly because this government is at risk now. There is a serious questions that need to be answered and need to be answered soon. I think the last thing the Lib Dems want to do is go into an election anytime soon, given their poll rating.
But you would go that far. You would go that far, would you, to say that you think the government's at risk?
I think David Cameron's integrity is at risk. I think his reputation is at risk, and that puts his government at risk. There are serious questions that need to be answered by David Cameron. I wrote this morning that unless he gets a clear narrative about what happened, who knew what, and when within his office, who was reporting to him, and what he knew about Andy Coulson, not necessarily when he was taking him into the Conservative Party Central Office as Director of Communications, but when he took him into government. What Cameron knew then needs to be laid out very clearly, and he can't run away from the Commons forever, because, you know, he's got Prime Minister's questions on Wednesday, and if he leaves it to then, it's going to be even messier for him.
Well, I think Jack Straw suggested something like that, didn't he? He called for a chronology of who knew what and when a little earlier. Let's just talk about the blagging. This adds a whole new dimension to this story, doesn't it? And one imagines that like the hacking, with more and more revelations appearing about that, we may see more and more revelations about this so-called blagging of information.
Well, absolutely. I think if you were to look back to Carl Bernstein and Woodward in Watergate, you'll look at how they blagged some of their information out of people without knowing it. I think blagging is going to be a lot harder to prove, to nail down, and also the public interest angle does come into play in a much bigger way. When information is restricted from journalists, they do resort to these tactics. Obviously, there is absolutely no excuse for, if the allegations are true, of accessing a Prime Minister who kept his family very private for accessing their medical records. But I think if say, Gordon Brown had bought the flat off Rupert Murdoch rather than Maxwell, I think there'll be some more sympathetic voices to the course of action the Sunday Times allegedly took.
Well, that's a whole different issue, of course.
It is.
I want to ask you about, you know, the shock threshold and what you think the public's opinion is of everything that's going on. Do you think it's something that the media village, if you like, is becoming increasingly obsessed with? And are the public really, or is the public really interested? And if they're not, should they be?
Well, I think it's the other way around, really, from what you said. I think this story was bubbling under the surface for many years, and you know, I think the reason the News of the World was so popular was because people enjoyed seeing celebrities and politicians maybe held to account and taken down a notch or two. And it's when it crossed the line into innocent citizens having their privacy invaded by a newspaper, that's when people got angry. And I think this anger is justified. I think it took the revelations of the fact it wasn't just celebrities and politicians. It was, in fact, innocent people who had absolutely no desire to see their lives splashed across the papers, especially when they were dealing with such a sensitive time. I think the public anger is justified, and if it's triggered what hopefully will be a long, hard look at the relationship between the government, successive governments, not just this one, but ones before it and before that, if those situations, if those relationships are evaluated now, then only good can only come of it. But I think the public anger is justified, and I think hopefully it will trigger some change.
Okay, Harry Cole, political blogger, thank you very much.